So my name's Matt McVicar, I'm a knife maker. I've been doing that for about 7 years now. So my progression in knife making, I started in 2013. So I did a class out at Tharwa Valley Forge. I'd been living in Canberra for a few years at that stage, and I'd seen it online and it looked like something that I would enjoy. I'd always had hobbies, so whether they were woodworking or metalworking, it was something that I figured I'd enjoy. The courses are pretty expensive though, and so I spent a bit of time sort of putting together some play money, and I also figured that I was going to think it was awesome, so I spent the year prior to doing the course buying all the basics. So I found a local guy that was selling anvils at actually pretty good prices. So I had an anvil. I went up to Corrins and built a forge, and then the last thing I sort of needed was a grinder, and a fella called Russell, who went on a lot of the forums by RSLT. He actually had upgraded to a Radius Master, which was the thing to get at that point, and gave me his old homemade grinder. So that was the day before I did the course. I got a 2x72 inch grinder, so I sort of had everything I needed to do it, and then did the course. Did what's now called the knife making course. Back then it was pretty much the only course that was run. So I forged out 2 hunters, put them together, and then sort of hit the ground running from there. So got home and pretty much got straight back into making more knives. Although I went down the stock removal route initially. So I did a stainless steel kitchen knife, because I had zero experience with stainless steel, so I thought that was a good idea. But got someone to heat treat that for me. Alistair Phillips actually heat treated it for me, local knife maker. And then did a full tang hunter type thing, with tapered tang, cerakoted blade, carbon fibre scales. Again, zero experience doing that, so I just sort of jumped in, and I spent a bit of time up at Corrin. So Corrin used to have a lot of his hammer-ins. Finished that one off up there, and then didn't do a lot for a little while, and forgot a lot of the forging techniques, but I was really lucky because Karim was starting to develop Tharwa Valley Forges, trying to expand it, and was doing a whole bunch of test courses. So he had a few lads that had showed some interest, and he would ring us up and say, I need to do a test course. So I got to do all these courses for free, and so I learnt to make Damascus, I learnt to make mokume gane, straight razors, I did anything else, bits and pieces here and there, but it really just accelerated that learning curve without the horrendous expense of doing lots of courses. And so then the next knife I made was a Damascus chef knife with mokume fittings and stuff. So I think a lot of what I did was just jumping in the deep end and having a go. And I've still got those knives, and I look at them now, and they're not what you would call pretty knives. I'll certainly progress from there, but they were the best I could do at the time, and I was still pretty happy with them then. And then I got a lot out of doing courses. I found that was the easiest way to progress or improve my skill set. So I did a number of courses with other people. So I went up to Keith Flutter's place and did a mosaic Damascus course with him. That was quite a few years ago, so a lot of it just went straight over my head, but the experience and sort of a lot of the basics were still there, and I think I got a lot out of that. And then did some courses with Wayne Saunders. I've done a few with him now. And when the opportunities come up, I've done courses through Thar as well. So I've done the masterclass with Kevin Cash on daggers and forging, and keyhole integrals with Rodrigo Sofredo. I didn't do the last one with Kyle Royer. That was more of a timing cost thing, but Jackson did it and passed on all the info anyway, so got plenty out of that. And about 2 years ago, I had the opportunity to go and work at Tharwa full time. So I was in the public service, that had sort of come to a conclusion, and jumped into teaching and working out at Tharwa. So now I teach knife making classes out at Tharwa, and when we're not doing that, we're doing a lot of production work, occasionally do some interesting projects and whatnot. and have slowly sort of built up my own workshop. So I do custom orders. I have a ridiculous backlog that I need to get through, as I think most knife makers do. But that's sort of where I'm up to now. Initially wanted to be a chef when I was leaving school. That was what I wanted to do. I couldn't get an apprenticeship because I was living in a small town, there just was no work. And I was sitting there eating a bowl of cereal one day, and my dad just sort of slipped a form in front of me for the Defence Force and said, "Why don't you join that?" I thought, oh, that's the thing to do. So I filled it out there and then, and within a few months I joined the army, specifically to do my chef's trade, which, as it turns out, was not a great idea because I didn't enjoy it very much. Catering was a good job, but it just wasn't for me. But I think that sparked an interest in knives, in the sense like the practical application and use of kitchen knives that's like a chef's bread and butter. And so I sort of had that interest, and I'd collected heaps of them and had far too many that I needed. But you know, we do these things. But fell right out of love with cooking, just didn't enjoy that at all. When I left the army, I sort of floated around for a bit, and that's where I did a lot of metal fabrication work. So I was doing welding jobs, building gates and fences and stuff for a company that had contracts with the New South Wales government, so we're doing some volume work there, but got some good welding experience there, and I also worked at BAC, and they sent me off to TAFE to do a bunch of welding tickets. So I had sort of started developing an interest in metalworking and whatnot, and had that sort of interest still in quality kitchen knives. So I think that's where, when I saw the course out at Tharwa, I thought that's something that would really work for me. I then moved into the public service, and I found that by this stage I'd started knife making. I found that it was a really good outlet. So public service work is not exciting, it's not glamorous, but it can be stressful, and it would be an outlet for me to come home and I just have my own space, my own tools. No one's telling you what to do. It's all about what you want to do, and it's a creative outlet that also would leave you something tangible at the end of it. You're not just sitting in front of a computer all day or doing one thing that at the end of that just feels like it was like, what did that achieve? There's this, you put in effort, and at the end of it there's something that's sitting there that would last. So I found that this was a really good outlet for me, and I would be sitting at work thinking, what am I going to do when I get home? So it was less about work, and I think a lot of people that, whatever their hobby is, if they really enjoy it, they'll find that it becomes a bit more of an addiction, and they're spending more time thinking about what they want to be doing in their workshop rather than what they should be doing at work. Which I guess was a big part of why, when the opportunity came to work at Tharwa, I sort of jumped at it. It's for the most part, very stress-free job. I really enjoy teaching. You get challenging students sometimes, but for the most part it's a pretty rewarding experience to get people started on that journey. Some will never go any further than that, but you get a lot of guys that are sending me messages and asking questions, or sending me pictures of what they made. Guys and girls, I should say. So that's I find pretty rewarding. So I guess some of my previous work experience had that practical application, so the understanding of how knives work and geometry and the fundamentals in metalworking. But some of it was it was an opportunity to escape from drudgery, I suppose, and do something fun. So teaching at Tharwa is, like I said, something I really enjoy. It's very challenging. For the most part, the courses are over 2.5 days, and you'll make 2 complete forged knives. We have some other classes that are shorter or longer, but they're sort of the core syllabus, I suppose. And it's pretty terrifying at first. Like, I knew how to make knives, and I was comfortable doing that, but you quickly learn that people do things in very different ways. And you've got to try and get across what you want people to achieve. You've got to be able to demonstrate to them that that's what you want, and then you've got to somehow coach them through that process to get them there. and people learn very differently. So the class is sort of set up where we do a talk in the evening and talk through the entire process, and then as you roll through the practical bits, I'll do a demonstration, I'll get them to do that bit, and then I'll do the next demonstration. And I've sort of evolved a process of what works for me, and the other instructors, Jackson and Adam and Baz out there, they'll have slightly different methods. But I initially started by saying, right, this is how we forge a knife, and I'd forge this thing out and then go, now go do it. And there would just be blank looks. And so I've sort of tapered that right back, and now this is how we forge a tang. It's done, you go and do it. And so it's more of a step-by-step process. And a lot of the time the challenge now is not so much explaining it well, it's making sure that everyone that you've explained it to understands, and people just learn so differently. Some people you can just show them and they'll go and do it and they understand it. Other people you've got to draw it on a whiteboard, or you've got to sit there and explain it to them, and then there's people that want to know absolutely everything about that in the next 10 steps, and you've got to try and dial them back. So a lot of the time it's a bit of a juggling act, and it can be challenging sort of finding that method that works for everyone. And then the other flip side of that is that some people can be pretty frustrating, and no one turns up meaning to be frustrating, but there's different people everywhere. And then the challenge becomes making sure that that person who's paid a lot of money to be there is getting what they paid for, and that they leave having enjoyed themselves. It's not, I don't get paid to have a good time, I get paid to make sure that these people do. And so often it's an exercise in patience. But for the most part I find that, and it's a perspective thing, so I've just got to remind myself that they want to be there, they want to achieve what they're trying to do, and that's my job to get them there. So when you sort of change that perspective and go, well, you know, people are different, they're not being annoying, they're being themselves, that's my problem, not theirs, then it becomes a lot more enjoyable. Then you just sort of cater yourself to make sure that everyone has fun. But having said that, you also get some students who you just like, that's awesome, that's really, really good. You'll explain it, they'll make it, and you're like, it's a sort of a validation that, yeah, I did explain that right, because that person nailed it, and that's a pretty good feeling. But I've not had, that I can recall, any classes where someone's like, that's terrible. They always get to the end, and no matter how good or poorly I think that they might have done, they're happy, and that's, you know, that's the best bit, is that they're putting oil on the handle, it's coming, you know, it's been sharpened, it's cutting stuff, and they're stoked, and they go home and they're happy. So it's pretty rewarding. I think what pushes me along in terms of improving is just a desire to make each of my knives just that little bit better. It's not, and while I've sort of spoken about, you know, competing with other guys at work and stuff like that, that's just a bit of fun. What I think drives me is knowing that I'm making the best thing that I can, and that when they end up in customers' hands, it's what they wanted and it does exactly what they want. I think foremost is just quality. I want knives that people, if, you know, they're still around and I'm long gone, they're like, this was, you know, the knife to have, not because it was popular, not because you know, it used the fanciest materials or whatever, but because it performed the way that people wanted it to. And on the back of that, a reputation for good customer service, and good ethics. I think that's, you look at the history of knife making, like you listen to podcasts like Mark of the Maker, where they talk about some of these old makers, and they spoke about the knives, but they would also talk about the people and how they were, and that was important to the history of those knives. So I think you don't want to be one of those people that is a big name, and there's not many of these, to be honest. There's mostly, it seems like there's some really good people around, but you want to be one of those people that people felt like it was a, you know, a pleasure or a privilege to meet someone that they respected as a knife maker, but left feeling like they also met a good person that was happy to talk to them, interested in what they were doing, happy to give them advice or information or just have a chat. Like I said, it's all about reputation in knife making, and it can't just be about the knives, it's got to be about the people making them as well. My whole ethos behind making knives is make what you want to make what you enjoy. Don't make what people tell you to make or expect you to make, or that you feel like you should make because someone said something. You need to always feel creative and inspired about what you're doing, and while it sounds a bit cheesy, you need to be making knives for you. You need to be doing what makes you happy, and that's what will translate into good work, in my opinion. So do what makes you happy.